Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back in time, not to a grand throne room or a battlefield of pharaohs, but to something far more immersive, a totally ordinary day in ancient Egypt. You're not anyone famous. In fact, you're someone most archaeologists wouldn't even bother cataloging, a lowly laborer in the bustling city of Thebes around 1250 BCE. The kind of person whose name never made it onto papyrus. But guess what? Tonight, you're the star of the story. The sun hasn't even peaked over the horizon yet. And already, the clay brick room you sleep in feels a little too warm. The mat under your back is woven from old reeds and a little lumpy. But you've had worse. Somewhere beyond the door, a rooster is making a racket like it personally resents your ability to rest. You sit up slowly, cracking joints that have been hauling stone blocks for the past 2 decades. Your linen tunic, if you can call this sweat-stained square of cloth a tunic, is folded beside you. Still damp from yesterday's wash in the river. No time to waste. The foreman doesn't exactly wait for latecomers. And you've seen enough workers demoted to latrine detail to know better. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and what time you're listening. I love seeing where you all are in the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open the wooden door, more a creaky plank than a real entrance, and step into the sand-coated alley. The air still clings to the cool of night, a rare and fleeting gift. Above you, the sky is a soft pink, and the ibis birds are already wheeling over the Nile, shrieking like they've got errands. Thebes is waking up, smoke curls from small hearths. A neighbor across the way is already yelling at her goat, which has decided the roof tiles are edible again. You nod at her. It's a daily ritual at this point. She doesn't nod back, still too focused on the goat. As you walk toward the communal well, passing shuttered stalls and sandals left haphazardly outside doors, the scent of something herbal wafts your way. A temple novice is burning dried blue lotus and incense outside a side shrine. The smell is surprisingly pleasant, like someone trying very hard to mask the underlying funk of communal sweat and river mud. You spot your friend Dahuti coming around the corner, chewing on a sprig of something he swears keeps the breath fresh. He's been saying that for years, and somehow still smells like fish wrapped in garlic. But you humor him. Morning, he mumbles. Barely, you say, rubbing sleep from your eyes. Another day, another backache, he adds, stretching his arms with a theatrical grunt. The two of you shuffle along like you're twice your age, and to be fair, you probably look it, even though you're just over 30. Life here doesn't age you slowly. It clubs you with a stone mallet of labor and sun. Your destination? A limestone cutting site a few miles outside the city. You'll be joining dozens of other workers, each with their own set of bruises and complaints, to spend the day carving blocks for the tomb of some mid-ranking noble who once sneezed in the presence of Ramses and now gets an elaborate eternal home for his troubles. As you pass one of the government buildings, a painted sign warns against theft and laziness, accompanied by a charmingly violent image of a man being whipped. Motivational, you mutter. The path out of the city winds past fields of flax and barley, shimmering faintly in the dawn. Farmers are already bending low over the soil, muttering prayers to Happy, the Nile god, for a predictable flood season. Historians still argue whether these early morning rituals were pure superstition or had some organized priestly influence. You suspect it's both, fear-driven tradition and a bit of extra insurance in case the gods were paying attention. As you reach the edge of the city, a few stray dogs lounge in the road, tails flicking lazily. One of them stands up to sniff your sack, empty for now, but will hopefully hold something edible by sunset. You wave it off with a practiced flick, avoiding eye contact. You've seen what happens when you give them hope. And just like that, the horizon shifts. The sun crests over the hills, blinding you briefly with its molten glare. Your shadow stretches long in the dust. This, you think, is the moment you officially stop dreaming about a better life and start living this one again. It's too early to feel anything but mildly resentful of whoever decided pyramids and tombs needed to be so big, so far from home, and so full of stairs. Still, there's a strange peace in the predictability of it all. Same sky, same aching feet, same complaints muttered under your breath. You're nobody, but you're part of something ancient. Something oddly immortal. You and Tahuti exchange one last glance. Race you to the quarry? He says. You don't even answer. You just start walking faster. You arrive at the communal washing basin just outside the worksite, where about 20 other laborers are already crowding around, splashing themselves with chilly water drawn up in clay jugs. It's not glamorous, but it's better than showing up caked in last night's sweat and yesterday's dust. You dip your hands into the water and rub your face vigorously, trying to scrub off whatever dreams still cling to your brain. The basin smells faintly of algae and something worse, probably because no one's cleaned it properly in weeks. Next comes your very elite hygiene routine. You reach into your small pouch and pull out a chunk of dried natron, a naturally occurring salt used for everything from mummification to armpit maintenance. You rub it under your arms like deodorant, though in truth, it stings a bit and makes you smell like a pickled goat. But it works, sort of. And then there's your teeth. Ah yes, the morning scrub. You unwrap a little bundle of chewed-up twigs from a flax cloth and get to work scraping. The ancient Egyptian version of toothpaste is a charming blend of powdered pumice, ashes, and, if you're fancy, pulverized ox hooves. Yours? Budget edition. Just crushed limestone with a hint of mint if you're lucky. The texture is somewhere between sandpaper and betrayal. Next to you, a man sneezes dramatically and launches into a lengthy discussion about how he's definitely cursed. You don't argue. Last time someone challenged him, he spat beer and phlegm at a priest in protest. His nickname is now Scarab Breath. Once you're reasonably scrubbed and only mildly irritated by the grainy residue in your mouth, you put on your work gear. Not that there's much to it. A stiff linen kilt, knotted at the hip, and a sun-scorched cloth for your head. Shoes? Please. This is Thebes, not Alexandria. Your feet are calloused to the point of geological classification. You look around and notice a curious little interaction happening near the edge of the site. One of the older laborers is handing over what looks like a dried crocodile tail to a young man holding his stomach. You vaguely recall hearing that dried reptile meat is a cure for indigestion, or a curse remover, depending on who you ask. Historians still argue whether these folk remedies were effective or just deeply committed placebo rituals. Then, a low drumbeat echoes across the site. The foreman is signaling the start of the day. Everyone straightens up, groans in unison, and begins to shuffle toward the quarry entrance. The smell of heated limestone and wet earth starts to fill the air, mixing with sweat and the slightly sour tang of beer someone cracked open far too early. Good breath won't save you now, you mutter to Tahuti, who's still chewing that twig like it's going to reveal the secrets of Ra himself. Your job today is transporting chiseled blocks from the inner quarry wall to a holding area where scribes log them for cart transport. It sounds straightforward, but each block weighs more than your neighbor's goat, and she's a robust girl named Hatshepsut. The blocks are slick with condensation from the cool inner quarry, and the path to the holding area is sloped and lined with loose gravel. You nearly twist your ankle twice before noon. There's no safety net, no sandals with arch support, and definitely no union rep. Just you, a wooden lever, and the faint hope that your back won't seize up mid-haul. Despite the monotony, you notice something strange today. The scribe logging the stones is new, younger, less sour-faced. He wears his coal eyeliner with an almost artistic flair, and his tablet is made of polished wood rather than clay. Fancy. He scribbles notes quickly with a reed pen, barely looking up. Occasionally he mutters to himself in phrases you don't recognize. Probably trained at the temple. Someone whispers beside you, or maybe he's one of those vizier's sons slumming it for a season. You try not to stare, but the idea of someone choosing this life, just for fun, is baffling. You imagine inviting him to dinner. Yes. Here's a lentil, and over there is the spot where the roof leaks. Hope you brought your own bug net. Back at the basin during the break. You're too tired to care about your sore feet. You splash more water on your face and peel a barley cake from your pouch. It's rock hard, because of course it is. You chew it anyway, slowly, eyes half-lidded, while the same guy who always tells Beatles stories starts a new one about how a scarab crawled into his ear and gave him prophetic dreams. You nod vaguely. It's easier than arguing. Over by the far wall, someone has painted a crude doodle of a cat chasing a man with a fish for a head. Scholars would call it folk satire. You call it a pretty good likeness of the foreman. And through it all, the sun climbs higher, baking the dust until it smells like ancient parchment and toasted bread. You suck down the last of your sour beer, which tastes like someone left it under a camel for 3 days. Hydration, Egyptian style. It's about this time each day that you start fantasizing. Not about escaping, don't be dramatic, but maybe about a slightly cushier job. Like pottery painting, or goose herding, something where the only risk is slipping and droppings, not dislocating your spine. Still, you're part of a workforce that built history, or at least the rear courtyard of some guy who heard about history once. And even though no one will etch your name in stone, you'll leave your mark in tiny ways. A fingerprint in wet mud brick, a boot scuff on temple stairs, or a sarcastic doodle on a wall that'll confuse scholars for centuries. And that's something, right? By the time the sun is directly overhead, casting harsh light that turns every wrinkle and dust particle into a high-definition feature. It's officially lunchtime, or at least, that's what the foreman yells, waving a stick as though anyone would dare to keep hauling limestone past the designated moment of blessed pause. You and Dahoudi slump onto the nearest semi-shaded rock. The shade is courtesy of a date palm that has somehow survived both the sun and the foreman's scorn. You call it the Royal Pavilion. Someone once tied a string around it to mark it as theirs. But the string's long gone and the tree is now open season. Lunch isn't glamorous. You unwrap your linen pouch and pull out, well, it's sort of food. A mushy porridge made from leftover barley and beer, with a handful of dried onions tossed in for texture. It smells like something that might ferment into something drinkable if you left it out for another day, which is probably how it was made in the first place. You eat slowly, not because you're savoring it, but because chewing gives your arms and legs a reason to stop moving for 5 entire minutes. Dahoudi has a dried fig, which he guards like a sacred relic. You raise an eyebrow. Bribed your cousin in the kitchen again? Bartered with a neighbor, he says. 2 garlic cloves and a half-done rat trap. You nod solemnly. That's a steal. Around you, conversation begins to pick up. One guy tells the old story again, about the time a black ibis flew overhead while he was relieving himself behind the scribe's tent. And that night he dreamt of gold and got promoted the next week. Historians still argue whether dreams were taken seriously in Egypt or just served as convenient excuses for weird behavior. Either way, you've tried to recreate that moment. It didn't work. Possibly wrong species of bird. A few steps away, someone's unwrapping what looks like honey-roasted locusts. He offers them to the group, and you politely decline. You learned your lesson last time, too crunchy. Not enough honey. You glance around and take in the scenery. Not the grand temples and towering obelisks the tourists from the future will gawk at one day. But the real Egypt, the Egypt of sunburnt backs, dusty roads, and gossip that somehow spreads faster than plagues. A group of kids runs past, barefoot and shrieking with laughter, chasing each other with mud balls. Their parents work on a nearby wall project, so they're unofficially supervised by whoever yells loudest. Usually the goat. Speaking of which, the temple goat, an honorary, highly disobedient member of the workforce, trots by like it owns the place, pausing to munch on someone's discarded barley crust before disappearing into the bushes. You're pretty sure that goat has seen more sacred rituals than half the priests. Lunch wraps up with a shared stretch and collective groan as everyone begins rolling joints, not of the herbal variety, but their own knees and elbows, which are constantly one wrong move away from locking up forever. As you stand, you notice a beetle scuttling over your foot. A sacred scarab, perhaps? Or just a regular dung beetle on his lunch break? Hard to say. The Egyptians see the sacred in the mundane. After all, the sun god Ra is said to roll across the sky like a beetle pushing the sun. You stare at the tiny insect for a moment, then flick it off with the edge of your sandal. You're not about to get mystical on an empty stomach. Nearby, someone starts humming. It's an old worker's tune, the kind you sing while dragging stones or carrying bundles. You don't know the words. Not really, nobody does anymore, but the melody is soothing. Repetitive, like the river's rhythm, it lulls you into motion, like a charm against exhaustion. Suddenly, Dahoudi nudges you. Guess who's back? You follow his gaze and spot a familiar figure approaching, the man with the scroll. The scribe, but not the fancy one from this morning. This guy? This is Tameen. You know Tameen. Everyone does. He's the bureaucratic equivalent of a sandstorm, slow, abrasive, and somehow manages to ruin your day even if you're indoors. Tamim's face is already scrunched up, lips pursed like he's been sucking sour dates since sunrise. In one hand, a palm paper scroll that looks suspiciously long. In the other, his pen, which he twirls dramatically like he's Ra's personal tax collector. Which, technically, he might be. Everyone tenses. The chewing stops. Even the goat, off in the bushes, pauses mid-munch. Tamim clears his throat with theatrical weight. I'm here to review work quotas. You resist the urge to groan out loud. Quota checks mean one of two things. Either someone's behind and about to lose a week's wages, or someone's ahead and about to get reassigned to a harder crew. He calls names off the scroll with the gravity of a judge passing sentence. One by one, workers approach, stand awkwardly, answer questions they don't fully understand, and return looking vaguely confused and disproportionately guilty. When he finally reaches Dahoudi, your friend straightens like a heron and saunters up with the confidence of someone who thinks they've hidden their shortcuts well. You try not to watch. You really try. But it's hard not to listen when Dahoudi starts defending his block measurements with increasingly implausible metaphors involving floods, divine intervention, and the weather. By the time he returns, he looks both proud and mildly terrified. He said I was creatively inefficient. I'm choosing to take that as a compliment. The sun is starting to slide downward now, casting longer shadows on the quarry floor. You brace yourself. The afternoon shift always feels longer, hotter, and somehow more personal, like the sun is targeting you specifically. You consider yelling at it, but you did that once and got a stern lecture from a passing priest about disrespecting celestial bodies. Whatever, it's back to work now. You reach for your hauling rope, grit your teeth, and remember, just 5 more hours until stale lentils and a scorpion check under your bedroll. Afternoons in Thebes hit different, mostly in the face. With heat, the sun hangs over you like an overbearing supervisor who's convinced you're slacking off. The air is so dry it feels like your sweat evaporates before it even escapes your pores. Your linen kilt clings unhelpfully, and even the rocks seem to be sweating. The path from the cutting site to the sorting yard grows trickier by the hour. Loose sand shifts underfoot, and your shoulder, bruised from hauling block corners all morning, has begun to throb in time with your pulse. You develop a limp halfway through your second trip but power through. You've seen what happens to laborers who complain too loudly. They're either assigned dung mixing duty or mysteriously reassigned to provincial granary oversight, which no one has ever returned from with both sandals. As you haul yet another chunk of hand-chiseled stone toward the scribe's table, you pass a group of men dragging a sled stacked high with bricks. They've rigged it with a water-soaked track to reduce friction, an old trick passed down through generations. One of them slips, lets out a colorful exclamation involving Seth, god of chaos, and lands flat on his back in the mud. Everyone pauses. There's a long silence, then a few chuckles, then more. Even the foreman snorts. The fallen man sits up, soaked and caked in muck. I meant to cool off, he says dryly, raising his arms like he just emerged victorious from the Nile. A ripple of laughter spreads across the site, cutting through the heat for a moment. You grin. These fleeting moments of humor are rare and sacred, like finding a fresh fig or a neighbor who doesn't loudly worship at sunrise. Still, your muscles beg for mercy. You briefly consider dropping a block just to see if it cracks in a satisfying way, but your luck probably isn't good enough for that. You trudge on. The route to the storage yard takes you past a large mural in progress on the side of a tomb wall. It's not finished yet, but even half done, you recognize the familiar scenes: boats on the Nile, fields of plenty, gods with animal heads offering blessings to people who look suspiciously like they're posing for a royal portrait. You pause to admire the colors: vivid reds, ochres, deep blues made from crushed lapis lazuli. One of the artists, a wiry man named Mena, is crouched at the bottom edge, mixing pigment in a small shell. He gives you a half smile. Careful, he says, I might paint you into the corner. The gods need a tired guy leaning on a shovel. Make sure I look heroic. You shoot back, and taller. Too late for that. You move on, passing a few palm leaf parasols shading the scribes. They always look suspiciously clean, suspiciously unsweaty, and suspiciously smug. One of them fans himself lazily with a broad reed and doesn't even look up when you pass. The scribe from earlier, the eyeliner one, is now sipping a chilled drink that definitely wasn't hauled from the same water basin you used. A clay cup glistens with condensation. You swallow reflexively. New job goal. You whisper to yourself. Become fancy scribe with fancy cup. The monotony sets in hard after that. The rocks blur together. You stop noticing the patterns on the stone, or the shape of your footprints, or the vague itch on your shoulder that might be sunburn or a sand flea. Your hands throb like they've been pounded flat. Your legs move more from memory than motivation. And then, just when you think nothing interesting could possibly happen again today, chaos. A loud shriek echoes across the quarry, followed by the unmistakable crash of ceramic. You turn in time to see a man staggering from the workers' shade tent, covered in what looks like lentil stew and holding his side dramatically. He tried to steal my ration, someone bellows. A woman storms out after him, flailing a long spoon like it's a royal decree. She's tiny but furious, the kind of cook whose stews are legendary and whose temper is feared across 3 construction sites. The accused thief protests, loudly and with theatrical outrage. It was just a sniff. Just one. I didn't even swallow. This defense does not hold. The cook yells something about curses, jackals, and, may Anubis decorate your intestines. Several workers form a loose circle to watch. One of them offers running commentary, narrating the fight like it's a sporting match. You stand frozen, half amused, half exhausted, clutching your hauling rope like it's a comfort blanket. Eventually, the foreman intervenes, grumbling something about lost productivity and, last time I'd trust anyone with lentils. The cook returns to her post. Victorious, the stew sniffer is sentenced to latrine digging, and everyone else goes back to work with just a bit more spring in their sand-slogged steps. As the sun begins to dip ever so slightly, casting long shadows across the stones, you take a moment to sit, not lie down. That's dangerous, but just sit. You roll your shoulder. Your spine pops. You stare at the horizon and feel, weirdly calm. There's something about this daily grind that numbs and soothes all at once. The predictability, the shared struggle, the way you and the people around you weave through it with quiet resilience and the occasional sarcastic beetle tale. You remember something your uncle once said, the Nile floods. The sun rises, and we carry rocks. When that changes, worry. It hasn't changed. Not yet. So you brush the dust off your knees, stretch again, and prepare to finish your shift before your joints mutiny. Your last haul of the afternoon is a particularly stubborn chunk of limestone, shaped like it personally resents you. It slips from your grip twice and nearly flattens your foot once. You mumble a quiet curse, not too loud. You never know which gods might be eavesdropping, and shove a splintery lever under its edge. A helpful shove from Tahuti gets it moving again. Barely. By now, your hands are raw, your feet are more sand than skin, and your thoughts drift to dinner with the hazy devotion of a poet dreaming about a long-lost love. Lentils, maybe even a sliver of roasted garlic if the gods smile upon you. The mere idea is enough to make your mouth water. The scribe logs your block with a bored expression, and you turn back toward the city, muscles aching in places you didn't know existed this morning. A few of your fellow workers are already ahead, trudging back through the narrow path, their silhouettes long and warped in the waning sunlight. The walk home is always a strange mix of relief and reflection. You made it through another day without collapsing, cursing too loudly, or being reassigned to dung-flattening duty. Victories come in quiet forms here. As you pass through the outer edge of Thebes again, the city feels more alive than it did this morning. Children are back in the alleys, this time covered in a suspicious mix of river mud and date paste. Someone's beating a drum somewhere, unevenly, but with enthusiasm. 2 women argue over the price of coriander at a small stall made from woven reeds and optimism. You detour slightly, not because it's quicker, but because it takes you past one of your favorite spots, the little incense shop tucked between a bakery and a shrine. The owner, a bent old man with the permanent expression of someone smelling something burnt, sits fanning himself. You nod. He nods back. This is the entirety of your relationship. And it works beautifully. The scent of frankincense wafts out from his stall, blending with the less romantic smells of street animals and the fishmonger packing up for the day. The air is thick with life. Old mud brick homes lean into each other like gossiping elders. A painted wall displays the image of a cat-headed goddess lounging luxuriously on a cushion. Someone has drawn little sandals on her paws. Probably a joke by local kids. But the result is charming. Your next stop, though you never really planned it, is the temple steps. Not the grand ones. These belong to a lesser-known temple devoted to a minor crocodile deity whose name you always forget. But it's quiet here, and you sometimes sit for a moment to catch your breath and eavesdrop on the chants floating from within. Today, the temple smells of dried papyrus, candle smoke, and roasted chickpeas from a vendor camped just outside. The chanting is low, rhythmic, and hauntingly beautiful. A novice priest sweeps the steps with a carved palm broom, glancing up briefly as you sit. "Long day?" he asks without stopping. You nod. He smiles faintly and continues sweeping. That's the end of that exchange. But somehow, it feels meaningful. You watch the sky shift. The sun's descent paints the clouds in peach and lavender. Bats start fluttering overhead, darting through the fading light like uncertain thoughts. Eventually, you rise, knees cracking like old papyrus, and continue home. The main market street is winding down now. Traders pack their goods, shout last-minute deals, and half-heartedly swat at buzzing flies. You dodge a runaway chicken, step over a tipped basket of lentils, and accept a sticky fig from a child you vaguely recognize, probably a cousin of someone who owes you a favor. You eat it in 3 bites and pretend it didn't have a little bit of grit in it. As you near your neighborhood, you pass familiar doors and cracked walls painted with old charms. One house still has a half-faded image of the Eye of Horus, drawn in blue and black to ward off evil spirits. Another boasts a string of onions, dried and curled, meant to do the same job with extra aroma. You glance to your right and see the goat again, still chewing, still smug. You suspect it runs this block. Honestly, it probably does. Your home is a modest one-room structure with a little alcove for storage and a slanted roof that leaks when the Nile gets uppity. But it's yours, or rather, your family's, and inside it waits the only thing more comforting than shade: people who tolerate you. Your wife is already stirring a pot of something that smells halfway edible. And your youngest daughter is trying to tie reeds into a doll without it looking like a haystack with legs. She waves at you, then immediately goes back to concentrating with the intense seriousness only 5-year-olds possess. You exhale deeply, your shoulders finally dropping. The day is done, not gloriously, not heroically, but completely. And in a world like this one, that's a kind of miracle. Dinner is waiting in a shallow clay bowl, steaming faintly in the dim glow of an oil lamp. You collapse onto the floor cushion with all the grace of a dropped sack of barley and glance at the meal. Mashed lentils, a pinch of cumin, and something greenish that might once have been a leek. Your wife offers you a piece of flatbread that's both warm and, impressively, not yet rock hard. She watches you eat the first bite, waiting, as always, for your critique. You chew slowly, not just to savor it but to give yourself time to phrase your response diplomatically. Much less gravel than last time, you say. A grin tugs at the corners of her mouth. Your children sit on a mat nearby, slurping from their own bowls, occasionally flinging lentil paste at each other when they think you're not looking. The little one attempts a stealth throw, but the blob hits the ceiling and sticks. For now, your eldest is recounting a dramatic retelling of how a neighbor's jar of honey exploded, like a volcano. The tale includes an impersonation of the jar, the bees, and the man's scream, all of which receive mixed reviews from the family. You nod along, too tired to laugh, but amused all the same. Conversations swirl around you, some mundane, some speculative, and some that blur the line between superstition and boredom-fueled invention. I heard the bread lady was cursed. Your wife murmurs as she folds laundry. How cursed? You ask, not looking up. The kind where all her dough keeps exploding. Sounds more like bad yeast. She says it's from a ghost. Of course, the ghost yeast. Classic. These kinds of discussions are nightly fare. Every strange hiccup in the day is attributed to spirits, curses, gods in a temper, or a neighbor who probably looked at you funny last week. Historians still debate how seriously everyday Egyptians took such beliefs, whether they lived in constant fear of supernatural meddling, or if it was simply a very colorful way to explain why your barley kept going moldy. As the meal winds down, your wife begins brushing crumbs from the mat with a bundled reed brush. The rhythm is familiar, almost ritualistic. You help stack the bowls near the door, where they'll be rinsed tomorrow morning by one of the older kids in the river. If the crocodiles are feeling generous, your cousin drops by, unannounced as usual, with a gift: 3 pickled radishes and a complaint about his neighbors singing. He plops down beside you and launches into a long-winded story about a fish merchant who claims to be a reincarnated baboon. You're skeptical, but you let him talk. It's part of the dance. Half the things people say around here are strange. The other half are stranger. At one point, your wife leans in close and whispers, "He's been talking about that baboon fish guy for 3 nights now. He's building a mythos." You whisper back. Eventually, your cousin yawns, pats his stomach with satisfaction, and meanders off into the evening, shouting good night to half the street on his way. You step outside for a moment, just to get a bit of night air. The Theban sky is dark but alive, scattered with stars that twinkle like stories waiting to be told. A faint breeze carries the scent of damp earth and old incense. The moon, a perfect curved sliver, hangs low over the rooftops like it's listening in. In the house next to yours, someone is softly singing a hymn to Hathor, the goddess of music and joy. It's more humming than words, really, but it's beautiful in its simplicity. You lean against the wall, close your eyes, and let the sound wash over you. Your neighbor, the one with the permanently suspicious cat, is sitting just outside his own doorway, rubbing something into his knees. Probably that strange ointment made of fermented onions and goose fat. He swears by it. You tried it once. You smelled like a marketplace in mourning for 3 days. Still, your joints are creaking enough that you briefly consider giving it another go. "Long day?" he calls. "Same as always." You reply. "Same as forever." He says back. "That's Thebes for you." Eventually, you retreat inside. The room is lit by one flickering oil lamp, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Your wife is braiding the little one's hair for sleep while telling her the story of the sun god Ra sailing through the underworld each night, fighting off the great serpent of chaos so that morning can return. It's a tale you've heard 100 times. Still, it never loses its magic. The child asks, "But what if Ra gets sleepy and forgets?" "He never forgets," your wife says, "because the people remember for him." You stretch out on your sleeping mat, adjusting your position until the bumps in the floor are somewhat evenly distributed. The thatch roof creaks in the wind. Somewhere outside, a frog begins to sing, joined by another, and another, until the sound becomes a lulling chorus. Your daughter crawls over and places her tiny hand on your chest. "I heard a ghost last night," she whispers. "What did it say?" You murmur. "Stop chewing so loud." You snort. "Wise ghost." She giggles and curls up beside you. The day has drained you, but not completely. There's still a little light in you, enough to be glad for the family at your side, the food in your belly, and the sturdy roof over your head, even if it leaks when it rains. Egypt is full of contradictions. After all, dusty but golden, exhausting but full of wonder, and somehow always exactly the same and completely different every single day. You drift, slowly, softly, into sleep. Possess. You exhale deeply, your shoulders finally dropping. The day is done, not gloriously, not heroically, but completely. And in a world like this one, that's a kind of miracle. But of course, sleep never lasts quite as long as you hope. Just as you settle into that first deep, soul-mending stretch of slumber, something rustles outside, a dry, scratchy shuffle that could be a mouse, a breeze, or, if the neighbors are to be believed, the ghost of a disgruntled bread seller who drowned in the Nile because she refused to use leavening. You crack one eye open. Nothing. Still, you're awake now. And once awake, the body likes to remind you of every single ache accumulated through the day. Your back creaks as you sit up. The house is silent except for the rhythmic breathing of your family, all lined up like linen-wrapped bundles. You step softly past your daughter, who mutters something unintelligible about fish in her dreams, and slip out the door into the night. The street is peaceful in that uniquely Egyptian way, quiet, but never truly still. Crickets sing from behind the walls. A cat yowls in the distance, probably chasing a shadow, and the Nile murmurs gently beyond the edge of the city. You find a familiar perch on a worn step near the granary wall and sit. knees drawn up, watching the stars blink in and out from behind drifting clouds. You're not the only one awake. Tameen, the scroll-wielding scribe from earlier, walks past, robes billowing slightly in the breeze, muttering to himself and periodically stopping to scribble on a piece of parchment. You wonder if he's listing quotas or writing very dramatic poetry about how much he hates sandals that squeak. He doesn't notice you, or pretends not to. Both are likely. A short while later, two men pass by arguing in hushed tones about whether or not one can legally name their son after a deity. One insists that calling your child Little Osiris is bad luck. The other claims it guarantees divine protection. Historians still argue over how seriously Egyptians took these name taboos, especially when half the population seemed to be named after Horus or Anubis anyway. Back at your perch, you adjust your tunic and stare at the temple rooftops in the distance. Their jagged silhouettes break the skyline like teeth. Somewhere beyond them, priests are likely tending sacred fires and whispering hymns to statues older than memory. You wonder what it would be like to live that life, clean, elevated, perfumed. But then again, you'd probably miss the mess of real life. The chaos, the lentils. You shift again, only to find a splinter in your thigh. Of course, a soft tap on your shoulder startles you slightly. It's Dahuti, carrying 2 cups of what he claims is cool river beer. You raise an eyebrow. It's tepid at best, but in the dark, that almost counts as refreshing. He sits beside you, groaning as his knees pop like sun-baked papyrus. You sip together in companionable silence for a while. Do you think the gods ever get bored? He asks eventually. With us? Yeah, same prayers, same complaints, every day. You consider, maybe, but then again, they've had a few thousand years to get used to it. He chuckles, then points at the sky. That star there, that's the one my grandfather said leads the dead to the afterlife. He said if you follow it, you end up in a field of bread and beer, and your joints never hurt again. That would be nice, you say, assuming you don't have to carry blocks around the field of reeds. He grins. He also said the beer there never turns sour. Now that's paradise. You sit for a while longer, sipping and stargazing. Somewhere behind you, a dog barks. Somewhere further, a baby wails. You can feel the city breathing around you, ancient and alive, even in sleep. Eventually, Dahuti yawns and stands. Back to the mat. If I don't get at least a few hours, I'll mistake a wall for a stone and try to carry it. You nod, finishing the last warm mouthful of your drink, and rise too, as you step back into your home, careful not to wake the others. The smell of warm bodies and dried reeds welcomes you like a soft blanket. You settle beside your family again, feeling the familiar crinkle of straw under your ribs and your daughter's hand curled against your side. In the darkness, the world seems quieter, less dusty, almost kind. And then, just as your eyes begin to close once more, the door creaks open. You sit up, heart suddenly in your throat. But it's just your cousin. Again, holding a basket. He grins, entirely too cheerful for this hour. Wife kicked me out. Said I snore like a crocodile. Can I sleep here? You stare. Also, he adds, I brought leftover radish stew. Well, that changes things. He lays out his mat at the far end of the room, muttering about how no one appreciates his culinary experiments. And within minutes, he's snoring softly, like a crocodile. To be fair, you lie back down, smile, shake your head. Egypt is full of gods and ghosts, temples and tombs. But what you'll remember, what truly makes this life yours, is the people. And maybe the stew, depending on how it tastes tomorrow. Morning returns without warning. It never gently arrives in Thebes, it ambushes you. The first sign is the goat bleeding directly outside your window. Not just any goat. The one with the personality of a retired pharaoh and the appetite of 10 dock workers. Its cries bounce off the mud brick walls like a personal alarm clock made of sandpaper and fury. You groan, shift, and immediately regret it. Every muscle in your body seems to have entered a collective strike. Your spine is offended. Your knees have filed complaints. Even your eyebrows are tired. Your wife is already up, coaxing the fire into a small flame to warm the morning gruel. The children are stirring. Your daughter's sleep mumbles something about an angry date and pulls the mat over her head. You wonder what kind of dreams date fruit inspire. And of course, your cousin is still there. now wrapped entirely in a reed mat like a burrito of complaints. A soft snore escapes him. Rhythmic, persistent, and undeniably crocodilian. You sit up and blink at the wall. Someone has drawn a smiling sun in charcoal beside your sleeping space. Probably the little one. It's lopsided and cheerful, like it knows your day is about to be moderately terrible. You stretch. Something pops. Probably important. Outside, the street is already humming. Vendors shouting. Water carriers slogging their jars down the alley. And someone nearby singing very confidently in a key not known to any god or musician. You splash your face with cold water. Smear on your natron paste like you're frosting a particularly unimpressed cake. And grab your kilt. As you step outside, you're greeted by a flurry of activity, and the foreman, standing there, arms crossed, waiting. Good morning, he says in a tone that sounds like anything but. You blink. I wasn't late. No, he says, you're not, but you're coming with me today. You glance at Tahuti, who raises an eyebrow and immediately pretends to tie his sandals with great intensity. Uh-oh. The foreman leads you through the winding streets, past the familiar market stalls and the goat, still chewing, and toward a gate you rarely pass. The workers' route usually detours well away from the more administrative parts of the city. But today, you're heading straight into them. You try not to make eye contact with anyone, especially not the priests trimming their sacred sycamores or the city guards polishing their decorative spears. The last time a laborer walked this way, it was because he'd accidentally insulted a tax official by sneezing in his direction. He was reassigned to scribble duty on brick counts. No one's seen him smile since. Someone's been asking for you. The foreman says finally. That stops you in your tracks. Me? You. You rack your brain. Who could possibly want to speak to a guy whose life accomplishment this week was not tripping over a half-buried jug? He leads you to a shaded courtyard behind a storage hall, where a young man in fine robes lounges with a fan in one hand and a tiny, perfumed dog in the other. You recognize him instantly. The fancy scribe, eyeliner, perfectly clean sandals, a scroll case that probably costs more than your entire house. He doesn't look up immediately. Instead, he finishes writing something with a flourish, seals the scroll with beeswax, and finally nods in your direction. You're the one who makes the straight block lines. He says. You blink. I try? He smiles faintly. I'm writing an inspection report for the overseers. They want representative samples of competent labor. He makes air quotes with his fingers like he invented sarcasm. So you've been summoned. To be a sample? To be measured, photographed by my memory, and likely forgotten in half an hour, he says. Cheerfully. Stand straight. You do. He walks around you, taking in your posture, the sun-darkened skin, the calluses, the not insignificant smell. He nods appreciatively. You look like a very tired monument. He says. Thank you? He scribbles a few more notes, then waves dismissively. That'll do. And just like that, you're sent off with a clay token, the kind that tells the guards you're not slacking. Just temporarily stolen by bureaucracy. You trudge back toward the site, slightly bewildered. Famous, Tahuti says as you arrive. Briefly. Did he give you anything? Food? Just an existential assessment. He nods solemnly. Those are fattening. The afternoon settles in with the heat of 1,000 suns. You return to hauling, to stacking, to the comforting rhythm of sweat and gravel underfoot. But today, you notice something different. People are talking. Not loudly, not directly, but you're hearing your name. Murmurs, snippets. The one the scribe picked. Straight line man. One person even calls you, the chosen. You could let it go to your head. You really could. But then a pigeon poops on your shoulder. Balance. Restored. The pigeon leaves a gift. As pigeons often do. And while you try to scrape it off with a twig, unsuccessfully, you reflect on the fleeting nature of fame. This morning, you were chosen. Now, you're the guy with bird droppings on his shoulder. Life in Thebes moves quickly. Your shift continues with renewed effort. Maybe out of pride, or maybe just to distract yourself from the smell. The limestone seems heavier today. It probably isn't, but everything does when your muscles are tired and your skin feels like it's slowly turning into baked clay. By midday, the sun is carving shadows that don't move, and your body aches in a new, more philosophical way, as in, why does everything hurt? And why are we hauling stones in the desert instead of, say, Fishing in a cool river and eating dates while composing poems? Dahuti is busy applying something green to his wrists. It looks like pond scum. Smells like expired olives. And he swears by it. It's from that healer in West Thebes. He explains. Said it was a blend of crushed lotus petals, fermented barley, and, turtle. You raise an eyebrow. Just, turtle? Ground shell and bits. He replies. Cheerfully. You decline the offer to try some. But another worker, one with a limp and a wild beard, asks for a dollop. He smears it on his knees and lets out a noise somewhere between relief and spiritual awakening. Feels like Ra himself just massaged me, he says, which is either high praise or heatstroke. You keep working, you carry, you stack, you drag. Every so often, you pause to stretch, or to swat flies, or to wonder how much it would cost to bribe the pigeon to go bother someone else. The day drones on with a rhythm as ancient as the Nile itself. And then the most extraordinary thing happens: free ointment distribution. The healer, the very one Dahuti mentioned, is making rounds. A squat woman with hands like tree bark and a look that could turn limestone into sand. She carries a reed basket full of clay pots and smells like mint and mystery. She stops by each worker, scoops out a glob of the green paste, and slaps it onto sore spots with a practiced thwap. You wince as it hits your shoulder. It'll sting for a bit, she says. Then you'll think you've ascended. It does sting, like 1,000 ants holding tiny torches. But after a few minutes, the pain dulls, and your arm feels strangely floaty. Still sore, but somehow less annoyed about it. You look around. Every worker's been dabbed, smeared, and slathered. Some are already sighing dramatically. Others humming old tunes as they resume work with a little more bounce in their sandals. One man starts thanking her profusely, claiming she's the reincarnation of Sekhmet, goddess of healing and destruction. She snorts. If I were Sekhmet, you'd all be ash. Keep working. She leaves behind whispers and the lingering smell of pungent herbs. The work continues, and though the sun is still merciless and the rocks no lighter, the mood lifts slightly. Joints ache less. Spirits ache less. You start humming an old lullaby your grandmother used to sing. Something about a crocodile who stole a loaf of bread and was punished by being turned into a fisherman. It made no sense then. It makes even less now. But it's oddly soothing. The scribe with the eyeliner reappears briefly. This time with 2 guards in tow. They're not investigating anything. They're just strolling, watching, supervising in that very specific bureaucratic way that involves lots of stern nodding and absolutely no lifting. They pass by slowly, hands clasped, eyes scanning. The workers try to look productive but not desperate. You offer your best, competent but invisible, expression. They move on. You turn to Dahuti. Do you think the eyeliner scribe has ever lifted a brick in his life? He considers. Only in dreams. Probably writes haikus about it. Do we have haikus? No. But he probably invented them. You both snort, then go back to hauling. Later, during the briefest of breathers, you sit on a rock and massage your calves. A nearby colleague is telling a story about a neighbor who claims to have been abducted by a spirit disguised as a clay pot. The pot, he insists, sang lullabies to him before hurling him into a canal. Historians still argue whether such tales were shared as moral lessons, sleep-deprived ramblings, or just extremely creative excuses for being late. I'd believe it, someone says. Serious. I've seen stranger things in this city. Like that goat. Yes, that goat. Speaking of which, there it is again, trotting through the worksite like it's checking progress. It pauses near a stone block, gives it a hard look, then wanders off with a grumble. You're not sure if it's judging your craftsmanship or just offended by the lack of snacks. The sky begins to change color, slowly. Softly, blues deepen to copper, then melt into purple. The sun dips lower, and the shadows grow longer, like ink bleeding across parchment. The temperature, mercifully, drops a few degrees, though the air still clings to you like sticky linen. You take one last load to the storage zone and dump it with a satisfied grunt. The foreman nods. No praise, of course. Just a nod, but that's enough. The healer passes by again and presses a tiny wrapped bundle into your hand. Use it tonight. Don't ask what's in it. You don't. You know better. By the time you and Dahuti leave the site, the sky is fading into darkness. The ibis birds are returning to their nests, And the world smells faintly of dry flowers and exhausted stone. You survived another day. You hurt a little less. And somehow, thanks to mystery ointment and shared sarcasm, you don't mind the idea of doing it all again tomorrow. The walk home begins as it always does, slow, quiet, a little sore, but tonight it has an extra layer of something. Not quite peace. Not quite numbness. More like that soft in-between state when your body has given up protesting and is just along for the ride. Your limbs move like someone else's. Your brain is floating somewhere behind your eyes, softly narrating the events of the day in a half-sarcastic whisper. Dahuti walks beside you, his arms dangling loose, his steps a little uneven from that one ankle that's never quite healed since the goose incident. You've never asked for details. You're not sure you want to know. I think my spine has left me, he says. Where did it go? Vacation. Possibly Memphis. Lucky. The streets of Thebes are transitioning into night mode. Torches flicker on doorways. Smoke curls lazily from cooking fires. The breeze picks up just enough to stir the dust and make the fabric over shop stalls flap softly. It's almost beautiful, if you squint past the smell of drying fish and camel sweat. You decide to take the long way home, not for scenic reasons, but because it passes the temple row. It's quiet there, always. You like quiet. You crave it after a day filled with stone, sweat, and too many people discussing whether scarab beetles dream. As you approach the temples, the change in atmosphere is immediate. The air feels thicker, calmer, more observed. Torches burn low near the gates, casting golden halos on the sandstone. You pass the shrine of Thoth, god of wisdom, where a sleepy acolyte is dozing upright on a stool, a wax tablet clutched to his chest like a teddy bear. Next comes the temple of Bastet. The courtyard is full of cats, naturally, lounging on stone benches, chasing moths, grooming with the pomp of royalty. One hisses at you as you pass. You nod respectfully. You pause at the lesser-known shrine, a tiny, almost hidden alcove devoted to Meridseger, the cobra goddess of the necropolis, the protectress of tombs. Her stone carving is faded, but still fierce. You place your hand briefly on the worn stone. Not a prayer. Exactly. Just acknowledgement. You're no tomb builder, but you live among them, sweat among them, hurt among them, close enough. As you move on, you pass a group of priests in quiet procession. They walk in near silence, save for the occasional jingle of amulets and the rhythmic tapping of a staff. Their faces are unreadable in the dim light, but their presence carries weight, like moving statues filled with purpose. Do you ever wonder, Dahuti says softly, if the gods actually see us? You consider it. Probably. I'm just not sure they care. He laughs, a dry, tired sound. Fair. Soon you're back in the bustling part of town. The market's mostly closed, but a few vendors linger, hoping for last-minute buyers. A man with a tray of dried figs waves half-heartedly. You wave back but keep walking. The ache in your legs is growing too loud to ignore. You pass a small commotion near the granary. A crowd has gathered. At the center, a young man is being scolded by an elder. Scroll in hand, the words, false weights, and missing grain, are repeated often. A guard stands nearby, looking bored. Another theft. Dahuti murmurs. Third this month. Times are lean, you say. Still, you steal from the granary. The gods watch. That's what they say. Or just the guard with the scroll. Same thing. Probably. The crowd murmurs. Some shake their heads in disapproval. Others nod, as if understanding. You've seen this scene before. And you'll see it again. Historians still debate whether these punishments were more about justice or about keeping everyone just scared enough to toe the line. You suspect it's both. Eventually, the guard drags the accused away, and the crowd disperses like smoke. The rest of the walk is uneventful. Your body is doing that strange thing again, being both exhausted and oddly alert. Every sound is sharper. Every scent is clearer. Someone's roasting something sweet nearby, figs, maybe, or dates in honey. Your stomach growls in protest. But you keep walking. When you reach your home, the front door creaks as you push it open. The clay lamp glows low, casting dancing shapes on the walls. Your wife is mending a tunic, squinting in the lamplight. The children are sprawled on the mats, tangled in sleep, limbs everywhere. You hang your headcloth on its peg and collapse into your spot. She looks up and smiles faintly. Good day? You think for a moment. No bricks fell on me. So yes. She nods, and hands you a small cup of warm, spiced water. It tastes like fennel and comfort. You sip slowly, and only then remember the healer's bundle in your pocket. You unwrap it gently. Inside is a dark green salve and a scrap of cloth with instructions scrawled in crooked ink. Apply where it hurts. Curse gently if needed. Do not eat. Probably. You follow the instructions. The salve is cool, smells like river mint and something slightly sulfuric, and makes your skin tingle. You lie back, close your eyes, and listen to the night sounds, the steady breaths of your family. The rustle of wind through papyrus blinds. And somewhere outside, the temple drums marking the hour. You think about the boy at the granary, the eyeliner scribe, the gods in the stones, the goat that judges all. And somehow, you feel oddly whole. You wake before the sun again. But this time it's not the goat, it's your back. Specifically, one section of it that feels like a collapsed mud brick wall. You reach for the salve, fumble it open in the dark, and smear a bit more where it hurts most. It smells even stronger now, like mint and crushed thunderstorm. But you don't care. It's working. You rise slowly, trying not to disturb the sleeping pile of family limbs beside you. Your wife mumbles something about fig prices and rolls over. One of your kids, without opening her eyes, murmurs, "Don't forget the good bread." You smile, as if that's ever an option. The morning routine unfolds like clockwork. Splash cold water on your face. Smear natron in your armpits. Chew a twig that tastes like regret. Wrap yourself in a still damp tunic. You greet your neighbor with a grunt. He responds with a grunt of equal ambiguity. It's the ancient Egyptian version of, "Morning, don't talk to me," but today has a slightly different tone. As you shuffle out onto the main road toward the quarry, you notice something. A small group of workers is gathered around a man holding a clay tablet. He's a messenger from the temple, a real one. Not just a guy who likes to say, "temple," a lot when he gossips. The man is reading out a decree. Monotone, with the enthusiasm of wet linen. Something about a ritual procession. Something about extra grain allocations for loyal civic contributors. And then, your name. You freeze mid-step. Did he just say? For demonstrated consistency in labor and respect toward sacred institutions. The messenger drones. He shall be permitted 1 day's observation leave at the Luxor temple precinct, with access to the lower artisan galleries and lunch. Lunch? You blink. Dahuti elbows you. You've been chosen again. You shake your head. I didn't even do anything. Exactly. That's your secret. You're too confused to be excited. You nod awkwardly and accept a small clay seal with a scratched-in symbol that's supposed to represent your permission. It looks more like a very tired fish. You'll take it. Instead of heading to the quarry, you're rerouted through the eastern streets. Through a corridor of painted walls and increasingly cleaner sidewalks. You pass stalls selling incense and oil lamps. And women in fine linen robes who glance at you the way one might glance at a broom left out of place. You smooth your tunic and try to look moderately respectful. The Luxor temple looms ahead. Grand and golden in the early light. You've passed it 100 times but never really entered. Today, a novice priest greets you, checks your seal, and motions you through. The shift is immediate. The air is cooler, quieter. The temple corridors swallow sound like sand absorbs rain. The scent of burning myrrh lingers in the air. Somewhere in the distance, a single flute plays a gentle melody that seems to follow you. You're led to a long hall lined with painted reliefs, scenes of battles. Gods bestowing favors, rows of perfectly carved offerings. You walk slowly, neck craned, taking in the details. You don't understand half of what you see. But it doesn't matter. The effect is the same, awe, tinged with curiosity, wrapped in dust and reverence. In one corner, an older artisan is at work, carefully repainting a faded lotus. He nods at you without pausing. His hands are stained with pigment and time. You watch him for a while, marveling at the precision. He doesn't flinch when a fly lands on his arm. He simply continues, as if he and the wall are having a conversation too sacred for interruption. A temple scribe gives you a small tour. He speaks quickly, clearly, and with the slightly nasal tone of someone who has memorized everything but still resents questions. He points out architectural features, storerooms, and sacred niches. You nod along, trying to absorb it all like a very polite sponge. Eventually, you're led to a shaded courtyard. Where a small lunch is waiting. Lentils, naturally. Bread, soft. For once, and dried figs. There's even a wedge of white cheese that smells like permission to relax. You eat slowly. Alone. No one interrupts. No one judges your posture. The temple bells chime in the distance, marking the movement of some ritual you're not part of but can feel vibrating through the stones. You lean back, the sun filtering through papyrus awnings. And exhale. The soreness in your bones seems to quiet. Not vanish, but hush. You feel seen, not celebrated, not elevated, just acknowledged. It's enough. After lunch, you're allowed to walk the artisan galleries, rows of painted workspaces. Sketches on stone, bits of broken tools left like offerings. One wall displays faint graffiti, a crude cat, a name, a doodle of someone dropping a jar. Even in temples, you whisper to yourself, someone's always doodling. On your way out, you thank the novice priest. He nods in that serene, possibly bored way, and hands you a small token, a carved amulet of the Eye of Horus. Shaped from faience and worn from his hand. For protection, he says, and focus. You leave the temple slower than you entered. Not out of reluctance, but because you want to remember everything, the scent, the hush, the way the walls seem to breathe. When you return home, your wife eyes you suspiciously. You smell like sanctity and expensive incense. What happened? I had lunch with a god. You say. Did he pay? You shake your head. Of course not. She smirks and returns to stirring the pot. You hang the amulet near your mat that night, next to your sack of tools. It's not much, but in this life, a little protection goes a long way. You don't sleep particularly well that night, not because of any noise or discomfort, but because your brain, usually so obediently dull after a day of labor, won't shut up. It keeps replaying the sights from the temple, the colors, the silence, the strange sensation that the walls were listening. It's like your mind has eaten something rich and can't digest it all in one sitting. You drift in and out of dreams full of flickering oil lamps, chanting echoes, and cats wearing jewelry. By morning, you feel slightly dazed, like a very philosophical scarecrow. But your body still functions. You stretch, grunt, and apply a bit more of the healer's mint sulfur paste to your knees. The smell wakes your cousin, who is now sleeping on top of the storage jar and mumbling something about arguing goats. You step outside into the rising heat, shake off the dreams, and head toward the quarry. Dehuti meets you along the path, already chewing on his morning twig. So, he asks? You nod. Big, beautiful, sacred, quiet, and they gave me cheese. He stops walking. Cheese? You nod again. Not temple cheese? Temple cheese. He lets out a low whistle. You're practically divine now. I expect a statue by next week. Will it have pigeon droppings? Obviously. Authenticity. Back at the worksite, things have not paused in your absence. The same dust, the same rocks, the same chorus of groans. But today there's an extra layer of drama, a debate unfolding in front of the foreman's hut. Two men are arguing, one waving a chipped shovel like a scepter, the other holding a piece of papyrus and pointing dramatically. You can't hear everything, but you catch phrases like, miscounted bricks, favoritism, and, my goat is smarter than your brother. Classic escalation. Apparently, one of the newer workers has been accused of fudging his work logs. Claims he hauled 6 blocks yesterday. The tallyman insists it was 5. Neither has actual proof, of course. And the foreman looks like he's strongly considering faking a fainting spell to escape. You and Dehuti stay out of it. Nothing good ever comes from inserting yourself into brick disputes. You just grab your ropes and get to hauling. Later, during the mid-morning lull, meaning no one has fallen over in 10 minutes, you take a water break in the shade of a partially built retaining wall. The heat is blistering, but the shadow offers just enough reprieve to let your spine uncoil. A new kid joins your crew today, barely out of boyhood, with skinny arms and the wide-eyed expression of someone still surprised by how heavy rocks are. You give him the standard introduction. Don't grab from the base of a block unless you want finger pancakes. And avoid eye contact with the goat near the scaffolding, he bites. The kid asks you if you've ever seen a god. It's an earnest question. He probably heard about your temple lunch. You think about it. I saw a statue of Sekhmet once. You say, she had a lion's head and eyes that followed you like she knew you were going to trip over something dumb in the next 30 seconds. Did you trip? Oh yes, absolutely. He nods, satisfied. Nearby, someone starts singing one of those songs that only makes sense if you're dehydrated. It involves a beetle, a sunbeam, and a woman who turns into a fish. No one knows all the words, but everyone hums along anyway. It passes the time, and the dust. Then comes the most interesting part of the day, mystery inspection. A group of overseers from another district shows up, led by a man with a staff too tall to be practical and robes so clean they must have been flown in from the heavens. He announces that they're conducting a random quality assessment, which everyone hears as, "We're here to cause confusion and sweat." They begin walking through the site, pointing at blocks, muttering to each other, and occasionally scratching things on their scrolls. No one is sure what they're judging. Shape? Size? Spiritual alignment? You continue working like normal, but you feel their eyes now and then. One stops in front of you, looks at the block you've just set down, and tilts his head. He says, "Yes," then walks away. You're not sure if that was approval or a polite diagnosis of failure. But you'll take it. By the time the inspection ends, 3 people have been reassigned. 2 workers have mysteriously disappeared, probably hiding behind the fig tree again. And the overseers leave with the same dramatic flair with which they arrived. What do you think they wrote? Dehuti asks. Probably, more lentils, fewer goats, or, workers appear adequately dusty. Or just a big drawing of a frown. The afternoon is thankfully uneventful. You finish your shift with minimal yelling. Only one rope burn, and a single instance of stepping in something that may have been sacred or possibly fermented beet paste. Either way, you scrape it off and pretend it never happened. When you return home, your wife has set aside a few preserved olives from the market. A treat. You eat them slowly, carefully, like precious stones made of salt. Later, as you rinse your hands and stretch your back, your youngest daughter asks you to tell the story of the man who made the sun rise. You know the one. It's absurd. He climbs a mountain, throws a pot at the darkness, and demands light, but you tell it anyway. You change the ending every time. Tonight, he trips on a snake and accidentally invents sandals. She laughs and falls asleep mid-giggle. You lie back, full of lentils and legend, and think again about the temple. You didn't meet a god, but you felt something, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough. The next morning greets you with the distant clang of a dropped amphora and the unmistakable sound of someone chasing a chicken while swearing in very creative hieroglyphics. You lie there for a moment, staring at the thatched ceiling, considering whether pretending to be asleep might somehow extend your lifespan. But your body has other plans. You sit up, slowly, like a mummy reanimated just for errands. The aches are there. Of course, morning regulars now, but dulled slightly by the lingering effects of the salve. It's a small win, and you'll take it. In this life, comfort comes in smudged portions. Outside, the air is cool, surprisingly so. The breeze carries the tang of river mist, damp clay, and that subtle earthy promise that today might not try to kill you with heat. You catch your wife in the act of sneakily wrapping some pickled radish in your work pouch. Bribery, she says, not looking up. In case the foreman's in a mood. You nod solemnly. I'll eat it on behalf of diplomacy. Down the road, the regular crew has started to gather. Dehuti's there already, adjusting the wrap on his ankle and grumbling about a new blister that looks like a drawing of the god set. He greets you with a half wave and what might be a yawn or a yelp. You can't tell anymore. Foreman's not here yet, he says he's attending a civic meeting. You blink. Civic? Like with scribes and scrolls? More like neighbors yelling about goats eating temple herbs again. Of course, that goat. Without the foreman, there's a distinct lack of urgency in the air. People stretch lazily, nibble on early lunch, or just lie in the dust pretending to study the patterns in clouds. You take the rare lull to wander the site a bit, past the hauling paths, beyond the stacking grounds. There's a small cluster of half-ruined workspaces that used to belong to a now abandoned project. Most people avoid it. Superstition says it's haunted by the ghost of a lazy brick who refused to be placed. You've never seen a ghost, lazy or otherwise, but the space is quiet, cool, and filled with the ghost of something else, unfulfilled ambition. Maybe dreams carved into the dust. Inside one of the ruined walls, someone once drew a mural. It's faded now, half worn by time and rain, But it shows a man walking through reeds, holding a stone, followed by a long line of animals, some real, some mythic. There's a tiny figure riding a goose like a chariot. You stand in front of it for a long while. It doesn't make sense, but it feels like it should. Historians would call it folk myth. Priests would call it dangerous nonsense. You call it unexpectedly calming. Eventually, you hear the commotion of the foreman returning. His sandals slap the earth with that familiar rhythm of frustration. And the sound of his voice precedes him like a divine herald of complaints. You hustle back just in time to appear useful. He doesn't say anything about your absence. He doesn't have to. He just glares in your general direction and mutters something about people who think they're too good for blocks now. Back to the work, back to the weight, the dust, the ropes, the repetition. But today, your mind drifts more than usual. You start thinking about the other lives, those beyond the worksite. The scribes and their endless ink-stained scrolls. The fishmongers by the river who whistle strange songs and always seem to know tomorrow's weather. The priests who claim they can smell guilt and predict Nile floods by the taste of dew on sycamore leaves. And the women, the ones who own stalls, shout prices louder than thunder, and still manage to know everything that happens within 10 blocks before breakfast. Your wife could rule an empire if someone gave her a ledger and a pointed stick. Even Dahuti, who jokes about everything, has a hidden skill. He draws, quietly, carefully, mostly in corners of walls or on broken pots. Little scenes, animals, workers, one time a perfect sketch of the foreman's nose. You think about what might have been, had things turned out differently, if you'd been born into scribes, or priests, or boatmen. But then again, you might have missed this exact rhythm, the way the stones thud. The gossip flows, the laughter rises out of the sweat. You've built things, carried things, helped shape tombs that might outlast memory. Maybe that's enough. Midday break arrives, and someone passes around a jug of particularly strong beer. It tastes like despair but hits the spot. One of the younger workers tells a new tale about a donkey that learned how to chant temple hymns and was elected mayor of a small village. No one questions it. Someone else starts a game of, what god would you be? The answers vary wildly. Ra, someone boasts. Obvious choice. Hather, says another. She gets music and dates. You think for a moment. Taweret, you say. They blink. The hippo goddess? She protects mothers, guards the home, and she bites hard. There's a beat, then a collective nod. Respect. The rest of the afternoon flows gently. The sun is merciful. The stones behave. And the foreman has decided yelling isn't worth the effort. At one point, you pause to drink water. And notice a lizard watching you from a crack in the wall. You raise your cup. To you too. You say. It doesn't blink. When evening falls, the city stretches and sighs. People drift homeward like sand on wind. The smell of food, smoke, and distant prayers curls through the air. At home, your wife is preparing lentils again. She apologizes. You tell her it's your favorite. She knows it's not, but she smiles anyway. After dinner, the kids play shadow games by candlelight. Your daughter turns her hands into a crocodile. Then a cat. Then, somehow, a two-headed priest. You pretend to be terrified. She cackles with glee. You lie down later, body aching in the usual ways. But the mural from the ruined site is still in your mind. The man in the reeds. The strange parade of animals. The goose chariot. You close your eyes and wonder what they were dreaming when they painted it. Maybe the same things you're dreaming now. You're halfway through a very satisfying dream about floating down the Nile on a giant lotus leaf while being fanned by extremely polite ibises when a sharp knock jolts you awake. Not a soft knock. Not the, hello neighbor. Do you have cumin? Knock. No. This is the, open up. Something bureaucratic is happening. Knock. You sit up, still tangled in your blanket. One sandal already stuck to your elbow. Your wife's already by the door, holding a ladle like a weapon. The kids blink blearily from the floor mats. Your cousin mumbles something about hiding the cheese. The door creaks open, and there stands a temple runner, young, winded, and way too excited for this hour. You've been summoned, he says dramatically. You rub your eyes. By who? The House of Records, he replies, then glances at your tunic. You should wear something less covered in soup. 10 minutes later, you're speed walking through the half-awake city. accompanied by a temple apprentice who talks non-stop about how cool scribes are and how he once saw one correct a tax table without looking. You nod, trying to appear impressed, but your mind is still in lotus boat mode. The House of Records is intimidating, tall, silent, and lined with enough papyrus to suffocate a crocodile. Inside, the walls are covered in intricate carvings and shelving towers that stretch toward the ceiling. It smells like ink, dust, and the kind of judgment only old scrolls can emit. A senior scribe greets you. He's draped in layers of linen, his eyebrows thick enough to qualify as separate entities. He holds your name tablet like it weighs as much as a stone block. We've received a query about your brick output, he says. You blink. What now? Your recorded numbers have been cited in 3 reports, one local, one from a Memphis archive, and one, well, we're not sure. It arrived by Ibis. You resist the urge to laugh. Apparently, your brief moment of inspection glory, combined with a few too-perfect block placements, has elevated you to something of a model laborer. You're now being considered for inclusion in a training scroll. A diagram, a teaching tool. Congratulations, the scribe says. You might be immortalized in ink. You nod. Will my name be on it? He pauses. Probably not. It'll say something like, Worker A. But, you'll know. Great. Before you can ask any follow-up questions, he hands you a slip with an official seal and waves you away like a pleasant draft. You're escorted out before you can process whether this is an honor or just a very roundabout way to track your productivity. Outside, Dehuti is waiting, of course. Heard the news, he says. You're worker A now. Better posture immediately. Do I get a bonus? No, but you get to carry the metaphorical weight of accuracy. You groan. That's heavier than limestone. He claps you on the back. Welcome to the Ink Elite. Back at the site, the day carries on as if you haven't just been semi-canonized in government paperwork. The sun still blazes, stones still resist moving, and someone spills a jug of beer and blames the wind. But you feel different. Not better. Not worse, just slightly more seen. Like the endless repetition of lifting, placing, adjusting has been noticed by something other than your own lower spine. Later, during break, one of the younger workers corners you. Is it true you're going to be on a scroll? Maybe. Do you get to pose? It's not that kind of scroll. He looks disappointed. They should at least let you look heroic. You shrug. I'll settle for accurate knees. By afternoon, the usual rhythm returns. You and Dehuti haul as a pair now, using a 2-man beam system that's both faster and less backbreaking, though not without its arguments about proper grip technique. The foreman watches but says nothing. He does hand you a new length of rope though. Unfrayed, unchewed, practically a blessing. Evening arrives with a golden glow. The sun dips low, casting long shadows over the blocks you've placed. You pause and admire your work, not because it's beautiful, but because it's solid, precise, and done. That's enough. On your way home, a child runs past you with a stick, yelling, "It's worker A, run before he measures you." You shake your head. Fame is a strange, exhausting beast. At dinner, your wife raises an eyebrow. I heard a goat tried to eat your diagram. You sigh. I'll frame the bite marks. Afterward, you sit outside under the stars, sipping a cup of something vaguely herbal and very bitter. Your daughter crawls into your lap, holding a piece of broken pottery she's been drawing on. It's you, she says, lifting a block. See? The stick figure has wide eyes, wobbly arms, and possibly 6 fingers. I love it, you say. You're famous now, right? You think for a moment. Sort of. She yawns. Don't forget us when you're in a scroll. You smile. I'll make them draw all of you next time. Even the cousin. Even the goat? Especially the goat. She dozes off, head heavy on your chest. And you lean back, eyes on the stars, wondering how many workers before you ever got sketched into legend, or were simply content with being known by the ones who mattered most. You close your eyes and wonder what they were dreaming when they painted it. Maybe the same things you're dreaming now. The next day starts softer than usual. No goat, no yelling, just the slow, familiar creak of sunrise slipping over the horizon and warming the walls of your home like a blessing whispered through old linen. Your body still aches, of course it does, but today it feels like a well-earned kind of ache. Not the heavy weariness of repetition, but the subtle echo of something built and remembered. You rise before anyone else. For once, the room is quiet. Your cousin has, somehow, rolled himself fully under the storage table and is snoring peacefully, cradling a jar of pickles like a beloved child. Your daughter sleeps curled into a bundle, the Eye of Horus charm you hung last week clutched in her tiny hand. Outside, the world is still cool. The street hasn't quite shaken off the dreams of the night. The air smells faintly of dew and old bread, and the ground is damp enough to hold footprints like promises. You walk slowly, aimlessly at first, then toward the river, where the mist hangs low over the water and the reeds sway with the secrets of 100 forgotten stories. By the bank, you see an old fisherman entangling a net with fingers that move like they remember youth. He hums a melody you half recognize, something from your childhood. Maybe, or something older. You watch in silence for a while before heading back, not because he sees you, but because he doesn't need to. At the site, things are quieter, too. The foreman is late, and no one minds. The workers move slower today, with fewer complaints and more jokes. Someone starts stacking the small leftover bricks into tiny pyramids and naming them after coworkers. Yours is taller than Dahuti's. He knocks it over with a grin. As the morning passes, a runner arrives from the House of Records again. This time, it's not for inspection, it's not for correction, it's just a delivery. A small, rolled piece of papyrus and a bundle wrapped in soft cloth. Inside the cloth is a fresh kilt, tightly woven and neatly dyed. Fancier than anything you've ever owned. The note is short. You are officially added to the Artisan Reference Archive. This document records your brick placements for training purposes. May your lines always be straight, and your sandals unbroken. It's signed by someone you've never met. You hold it for a long time, not sure what to do. Part of you wants to laugh. Part of you wants to run home and show your daughter. Mostly, though, you just feel quiet, steady. You tuck the note into your pouch, fold the new kilt carefully, and get back to work. Because scroll or not, fame or not, the wall still needs building. And you're not done yet. As the sun arcs over the sky, the site grows busier. A traveling food vendor sets up near the edge, offering skewered lentil cakes and dried figs on sticks. Dahuti buys 2 and insists one is for ceremonial appreciation. It tastes like dusty victory. Later, during your final load of the day, the boy from a few days ago, the one who asked about gods, runs up with a handful of reeds and a big smile. I made something, he says. It's a necklace, or something that wants to be a necklace. Mostly it's knots, and love. For luck, he says, because you're the one who never drops anything. You do drop things, constantly, but not this. You tie it on, proudly. Evening comes, you walk home slowly, your shadow long and familiar, stretched across the same roads you've walked for years. And yet, today they feel different, not new, just honored. Your wife sees the kilt, rolls her eyes, and mutters something about a man who wears scrolls like he invented bricks. But she smiles as she says it. You eat dinner under the stars. The children asking for stories. The goat eyeing your leftover flatbread like a jealous sibling. You give it a piece. Just this once. Later, you lie on your mat. The amulet near your head. The new kilt folded nearby. The reed necklace resting on your chest. The walls of your home are cracked. Sure, the floor's uneven, and the ceiling still creaks when it rains. But tonight, it feels like a palace. You think of the people who will read your name, not the full one. Not your stories, but the way you held a block steady. How you kept the line straight. They'll never know your daughter's laugh, or Dahuti's beetle jokes, or how the goat sometimes cries when it's lonely. But you know, and maybe that's the better story. You close your eyes, let your breath slow, and listen to the soft hum of the city settling into night. Thebes doesn't sleep so much as shift. The gods still whisper in temple halls. The river still sings. Somewhere, someone else is telling a story under a flickering flame. And you rest. You earned this. And now, the night stretches long and slow, like the Nile under moonlight. The breeze settles gently over your home, rustling the reeds outside, carrying the last scents of oil lamps and sweet date ash from evening fires. The stars wheel above you in their eternal dance, watched by ibis wings and quiet temple stones. Your muscles, sore and proud, release their grip one by one. You feel the day leave your fingers, your knees, your spine, like sand falling from a palm. You don't hold it back. Let it drift. The noises soften. The world hushes. Even the goat gives in. You lie still beneath the same roof as so many nights before. But something is different now. You've built more than blocks and walls, you've stacked small, unseen moments into something lasting. A name etched not in stone, but in the hearts and smiles of the people who truly saw you. Perhaps no statue will wear your face. No hymn will carry your name through temple corridors. But tonight, you're known. You are seen. You are home. So now, take one last breath, slow and steady. Feel the linen wrap your limbs like a soft river current. Let the silence fold over you. And sleep, sleep, ancient worker of Thebes. You've walked the dust, carried the weight, felt the sun, heard the gods. Now, let the night carry you.